Well, my heart might be pumping diamonds at this point after the last few games. Get it? Because high blood pressure, close games. Anyway, the point is, regardless of how and against whom, the Kraken have won their last 4 and sweep another road trip, getting all 8 points. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken, for the 4th straight game, come out with the win, defeating the Colorado Avalanche 3-2 in overtime. So while yes, it is true that after how the last few games have gone, I could really use the Kraken just blowing out the Ducks and not letting that one get close. But this was a very exciting game, a great one, even regardless of if you had any rooting interest, against two teams that, let's just say, they could end up meeting each other again this season, even though all 3 regular season meetings are done. And although the Avs did just get Cale Makar back for this game, because of course they did, there's no changes in the Kraken lineup, so let's jump right into it. Where it is Colorado that gets the slightly better start, at least right out of the gate, but it doesn't take long for the Kraken to get their legs back under them and get into this game and start taking control of it over the next few minutes, eventually leading the shots on goal 4-1. But of course, as can happen, and it seems like even if not at the start of the game, we've been seeing this more and more of late, against the flow of play, even with the Kraken having most of the momentum, around the halfway point of the first period, it's Colorado who ends up striking first. But before we get to how that goal ends up getting scored, I do have a bone to pick with how that puck ends up in the offensive end for the Avalanche in the first place. Now, we know that even though technically speaking, icing is a pretty clear-cut rule, it's just a team being the last to touch the puck before it goes cleanly across the center ice line and far or opposing goal line without being touched by anybody else. It does tend to be the case that players will often get a 1 or 2 foot cushion in front of that center ice line that they can throw it in, especially if they're going to go off on a change. The refs will give them that 1 or 2 extra feet and not call it icing. So again, even though it's not technically how the rule works, we do just accept that there's often that little bit of cushion around center ice for icing, even though there isn't a cushion for other rules, like offside, for example. It is what it is with icing. Now, the one thing that can negate icing, even if it does cross both of those lines without being touched, is if the opposing goaltender at the other end comes out of his net, which Grubauer doesn't do here, I think because he was expecting icing, as Makar, who dumps this puck in from the Avalanche end of the ice, isn't even within the 2 feet that has that cushion every now and then. He's a good 10 feet in front of, or I guess a good 10 feet behind center ice when he throws this puck in because Tanev is coming over to challenge him. So yeah, this is not even close to that typical cushion. He's given a few extra feet, and this definitely should have been icing. But it isn't. The puck goes all the way in, down around the Kraken net, off to the other side, where there ends up being a puck battle for the puck along the boards down in the far corner, which the Avalanche do end up eventually winning out to Nathan MacKinnon, who gets that puck near the boards and then is skating towards the slot, right through the entire Kraken defense, who are pretty clumped up around him. But right as he gets up close to, I think it was Tanev again, he just stops on a dime, whips around, fires off a shot, and beats Grubauer top corner, I think catching pretty much everybody off guard, as he just kind of creates a couple feet of space for himself in that Kraken defense, which, again, was actually pretty tight. But a player as skilled as MacKinnon is just needs that couple feet of space that he creates for himself to get a good shot attempt off and, well, score. So even though, yes, he probably could have been defended a little bit tighter by one of the Kraken players there around him, honestly, I think this just comes down to a great play by a great player to get the Avalanche in the lead. Also ignoring the fact of how the puck ended up in that end of the ice in the first place. Following this ice-breaking goal for MacKinnon, play does even out really for pretty much the rest of the first period, even through an Avalanche power play that they would get a couple minutes later, that the Kraken kill off pretty well. Right up until the very end of the first period, the Kraken get one more very dangerous push with a few consecutive shots off on net and a couple of them in tight. But Georgiev, who was fantastic in net for the Avalanche in this game, is able to keep the puck out, and we get to the end of the first with the Avs leading 1-0. Early on in the second period, the Kraken are going to get their first crack at the power play, although like the Avalanche first attempt in the first period, it also comes up empty. Following that, though, over the next few minutes towards the middle of the second period, this game pretty much turns into a track meet as both teams are getting rush chances up and down the ice at either end, both goaltenders coming up with spectacular save after spectacular save. The Kraken, in fact, getting 3 breakaway or partial breakaway chances First, it's Tanev with a clear breakaway, then McCann more of a partial one, and finally Tolvanen gets a breakaway chance. All of those saved by Georgiev in one way or another, as he was having a fantastic game in net for the Avs, and for a long time looked like he was going to steal this game for them, especially with the Kraken pretty safely outshooting the Avalanche throughout the entire game. But eventually, thankfully, the Kraken do find a way to tie up this game towards the middle of the period, and it doesn't even come on one of these rush chances. In fact, it comes on what seems like a pretty harmless play for the Kraken in the offensive end, as Schwartz manages to get a puck out from the boards, gets it up into the corner to Borgen, who from that corner fires off a shot on net. And with a goaltender playing as well as Georgiev did in this game, there's pretty much two ways to get the puck past him. One, when he's seeing the puck as well as he is, take his eyes away and screen him, which the Kraken don't do here. But the other way, and this is what Wennberg does, flashing in front of Georgiev on this Borgen shot, is to change the trajectory of that puck right before it gets to him, as Wennberg gets his stick on the ice and tips this puck beautifully into the top corner of the net. As that shot from Borgen sliding along the ice, Wennberg puts his stick on it and ramps that puck off of his stick and into that top corner to tie the game at 1. However, unfortunately, that tie game would not last very long, as apparently the rush chances also weren't done, and it's Dennis Malgin who gets a clean breakaway from Makar again, this time without breaking any rules. And Malgin skates in on the breakaway and scores to give the Avalanche their second goal of the game and give them back the lead. It's 2-1. Just like was the case with the Avalanche goal in the first period, play pretty much evens out, and this would be the last goal of this one as well. Even through another power play, though this time it's a Kraken power play, their second of the game that ends up coming up empty, and we would get to the start of the third with the score still 2-1. But while we are going to go to the start of the third with the Avalanche leading, they are going to be 2 skaters down, as right at the buzzer on a delayed call, there's a tripping call against the Avalanche, and then going to argue that tripping call for what reason I still don't know. It was clearly a tripping call. Rantanen goes and says apparently one too many words to the official. He gets teed up for a personal or a unsportsmanlike conduct and gets sent to the box himself. So the Kraken are going to start with 2 minutes of 5-on-3 to start the third period. Now, it does start at center ice because it's the start of the period, and that trumps the start of a power play starting in the offensive end. But the Kraken get the puck into the offensive end relatively quickly, and then are just kind of indecisive with it and maybe trying to pick their spot a little bit too much, not forcing the issue with the 2-man advantage. And although they do create a lot of pressure and actually do end up getting a number of shots, at least shot attempts off on goal, none of them find their way past Georgiev, and the Avalanche kill off that 2-man advantage for 2 minutes. And then not only do they kill off what seemed like the Kraken's best chance at tying up this game, they end up getting a power play shortly after doing so, which does get a number of pretty good chances of its own, but Grubauer makes a couple big saves, and the Kraken kill that one off. Then they get another chance at the power play, as once again it's a parade to the penalty box to start out this third period, but that too is killed off, as both teams end up coming up empty on the power play in this game. Avalanche going 0 for 2, and so Kraken penalty kill going back to being great after letting up a goal to stop another streak of killing off penalties. They start another one, but the Kraken power play does not build off a strong game in the last one, as they go 0 for 5, including 2 of those being that 2-man advantage. Anyway, the point is, nobody scores on the power plays in this game, and then for the rest of this third period, which is still most of it, even though there's already been 3 power plays here right at the beginning of it, the Kraken do slowly build momentum as the third period goes along, being willing to take more and more risks as far as allowing transitions the other way in order to build that extra little bit of momentum and try and get more scoring chances in the Avalanche end, which they are able to get set up pretty well on a number of occasions, but they just cannot seem to figure out how to get another one past Georgiev, who continued to look like he was going to steal this game for the Avalanche, with the Kraken massively outshooting the Avalanche at this point. And so, eventually, with Georgiev standing on his head in net for the Avalanche, we do get into the final 2.5 minutes of this game, and definitely in the window where you're starting to think about when the Kraken will pull Grubauer to get that extra skater on the ice, and make that one last opportunity to try to tie this game up. And as we do get into the 2.5 minute mark of time left, it is actually McKinnon who, after scoring that goal, and a very nice goal at that to open the scoring in the first, kind of seemed to have a bit of an off game for him, turning over the puck a number of times throughout the course of this game, having some bad passes that went wide of players and killing offensive zone pressure for them throughout the game. Sure enough, it's a McKinnon turnover that actually gets the puck out of the Kraken end and gets that transition down back into the Avalanche end again, where the Kraken are able to get set up for the, what seemed like, I don't know, dozens of times over the course of this period. It was probably just a few, but either way, the Kraken get back set up with just a couple minutes left in the game. And then it's another McKinnon turnover behind the net to Schwartz, as you're starting to think, all right, the Kraken have the puck now behind the net. Maybe they pull Grubauer, but it doesn't even take that long as Schwartz takes that puck from McKinnon, goes back around behind the net, gets a pass off to Tanev. Tanev shoots, and he scores to tie the game at 2 with 2.5 minutes left, as the Kraken somehow find a way to get another one past Georgiev. It basically took a turnover and a quick pass from behind the net, and a surprise shot from Tanev. And this time for Tanev to score, the net didn't even have to be empty, as the Kraken, once again with a late Tanev goal, are able to force overtime. Which, spoiler alert, yes, no one scores for the next 2.5 minutes. We do get to overtime. And honestly, going to overtime after that late tying goal from Tanev, I was kind of feeling like it was great either way. Sure, it's awesome if the Kraken can get a second point, but even coming out of this game with 1 point, not to mention the fact that it would then be 7 out of 8 points on this road trip the Kraken would come away with, where, like we said towards the beginning of it, 4 or 5 points seemed like the minimum and kind of what we were hoping for. So to come away with it from 7 would still have felt pretty good. But of course, that 8th point is what the Kraken are going for, and in overtime, they eventually are able to get it, not even letting the Avalanche touch the puck once outside of maybe during the fight during the faceoff at the very beginning. The Kraken get possession and don't let go of it as they skate around, get into the offensive zone a couple of times, and even get towards the net a couple of times, but just don't have that one good shooting chance that they really, really seem to want. So eventually, after a couple of changes as the Kraken pass the puck around and go for a line change, it's Beniers who dumps the puck into the Kraken end for Vince Dunn as he goes off on a change. And then Dunn, from below the faceoff dot or right around the faceoff dot in the Kraken end, in fact, you can see for yourself where Dunn's at when he makes this pass. He throws this puck up ice all the way to the far blue line, where on that far blue line, it's Gord who receives the pass, skates in for the partial break, fires off the shot, and buries it past Georgiev just over his pad and into the net to win the game for the Kraken in overtime 3-2. And honestly, out of 35 shots the Kraken get in this game, it's the first one that Georgiev really had much of a chance on that he doesn't end up saving, and it's the one the Kraken needed to end up winning this game. Obviously, they scored 2 more before that, but the Tanev one, it's a quick pass from behind the net and a guy out in the slot, so really not much of a chance for Georgiev there. And then obviously the nice tip from Wenberg pretty much takes away Georgiev's chance on that one. So this one, even with it would have had to be a fairly nice save, was really the first one that he lets in that he had a chance of saving. Of course, again, it's all the Kraken would need to pick up that 8th point on the road trip. Perfect 8 for 8 as far as that's concerned, as they come home to face a Ducks team, which, again, it'd be really nice if they could just not have a terribly interesting game and win that one in some sort of blowout fashion. At least a multi-goal lead going into the late part of the third period would be nice. In the end then, with this game for the Kraken, even outside of what it means points-wise in the playoff race picture, this is exactly the type of game and the type of win that the Kraken are going to need come playoff time in order to make an actual push to make a deep run in the playoffs. We talked about it with that game against the Bruins about how that felt like a playoff game, and this game, even though it wasn't the 11-goal affair of that Bruins game, it also had that playoff feel. In fact, it probably felt more like a playoff game in that it was a much more reasonable 3-2 score. And sure, overtime works different in the playoffs. They just keep playing periods until someone scores at 5-on-5. You don't do the whole 3-on-3 thing, which actually is the 3-on-3 part's kind of unfortunate for the Kraken, because after going 0 for 3 early on in the season, they had those 2 days where they just focused on 3-on-3, and since then they're 7-0 in overtime. Of course, they let those 3 games get past overtime and go to shootout and lost all 3 shootouts, but aside from that, when the game ends in actual overtime, they've won 7 straight now. Anyway, outside of that, this game had that playoff feel, and the Kraken coming from behind late to force overtime and then win it in overtime, this is exactly that type of just get your head down. You're getting goaltendered by a fantastic performance, like is probably going to happen in the playoffs a number of times, and still find a way to even things up and eventually beat that goaltender to win the game. And meanwhile, at the other end of the ice, even though we really didn't mention him much during that recap, Grubauer had a fantastic game of his own in net for the Kraken. He just wasn't tested as often as Georgiev was for the Avs, but he also came up with a couple of pretty big saves, especially in that series there in the middle of the second period where there were rush chances at both ends of the ice. He made a couple of big saves there, and also I think we mentioned a couple pretty big ones on one of the two Avalanche power plays. So even if it does maybe get a little bit outshined by what Georgiev was doing for the Avalanche, Grubauer, in another return to where he used to call home in Colorado, had a fantastic game and played very well for the Kraken in this one. Which again is another thing the Kraken are going to need come playoff time. In fact, he played well enough that as we get to the Kraken 3 stars, I honestly think he was the Kraken first star in this game. The Avalanche, even outside of how their goaltender was playing, easily could have scored 3 or 4 in this game, but Grubauer, a couple of big saves, and even the 2 that he lets in. The first one we talked about, that's just a great play from a great player in McKinnon. And then the second one, it comes in tight on a breakaway, and breakaways are high danger scoring opportunities for a reason, and yeah, that's, you do your best on a breakaway, but there's only so much you can do, and Grubauer wasn't able to come up with that one, although he did make a couple of other stops on breakaway chances for the Avs, or at least partial breaks anyway. The second star for the Kraken in this game, at least for me anyway, is a guy that has been playing pretty well now over this pretty much entire road trip, and even has a couple of goals leading into this game on the road trip, but they were both empty netters. Still, he hasn't quite gotten into the 3 stars, so part of this is that I think he's kind of body of work on this road trip, deserved a star, not gotten one yet, but especially with that game-tying goal late, it's Brandon Tanev. He has really played the Brandon Tanev style of hockey this entire road trip, that tenacious, great on the forecheck and back check, creating plays. He's had a few breakaways over the course of these last 4 games, hasn't scored on those. I guess he had a breakaway to score on the empty net in the last game, but you don't really count that as a breakaway. Either way, outside of those 2 empty net goals, he picks up a goal now with the goaltender actually in net to tie the game late in this one. And yeah, definitely deserving of a star. The third star then will be the guy that set him up for that goal, as well as set up Borgen for his shot that was tipped in by Wennberg. So 2 assists on the night for Jaden Schwartz, as he continues to play really well for the Kraken. A big part of the success of that line of he, Bjorkstrand, and Wennberg. Also, speaking of which, not only Wennberg playing well, but Bjorkstrand was back in this game after leaving the last game late and not coming back. He was out on the ice at the start of this game and played the whole one, so fortunately, whatever injury he sustained late in that game, he was able to recover from at least enough to continue playing. And I will say, as the Avalanche are my second favorite team, it's a distant second, but they are my second favorite and the team I cheered for prior to the Kraken existence. It was good to see the Avalanche get at least the 1 point in this game, and also good to see them get a great performance out of pretty much, I think he's their secondary goaltender at this point, with Francouz being the primary, having played the night before with the Avalanche on the second half of a back-to-back. But good to see the Avalanche getting that good of goaltending from both goaltenders, as they're going to need it for this playoff push. Fortunately, they should have no problem making the playoffs, as the Flames have pretty much completely fallen out of the race at this point. They're all but out of it. And although the Predators are technically still in the race, and in fact ahead of the Flames at this point, and with games in hand on top of that, they did sell off some pieces at the deadline, so I just don't know that I believe that they can jump either Winnipeg or the Avalanche, or maybe a team that falls out of the top 4 in the Pacific to end up getting into the playoffs. So I think the top 8 at this point are pretty much set, which means the Kraken, they'll face somebody in the playoffs. It's just a matter of which one of the other 3 teams in the division that'll end up being. Or it could be one of the wild cards if they can pass Vegas. Anyway, with that being said, let me know down in the comment section what you guys thought of this game. Again, one that really did feel like a precursor for what we can expect in the playoffs. And with that, very good to see the Kraken actually win and come back to win one of these playoff-style games against a very good team that should be there as well. Also, who your 3 stars could be if you disagreed with my 3 stars, and until that game against the Ducks, which for heart-related reasons. Would be nice to see them have a little bit more of a relaxing style of win. Until then, if you did enjoy this video, or made it to this point, thank you very much for watching, and if you did enjoy it, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel, so I'd appreciate using them. And stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken!